The woman was simply shaking the dust off her cleaning rag, but the man mistook it for a wave. He tipped his hat and greeted her warmly in return. His hearty laugh made her heart skip a beat. She didn't dare peek out until he was far down the street. Her name was Ethel, just a maid in a wealthy household who thought love was completely out of reach for someone like her. But the next day, she couldn't help shaking her rag again, and when the man responded just as warmly, it made her feel all fuzzy inside. On the third day, it was pouring rain, and she thought he wouldn't pass by. But soon enough, he appeared in a raincoat, only to find no sign of Ethel at the window, leaving him to walk away, disappointed. The fourth day, Ethel stood by the window for ages but didn't see that familiar smile, thinking she'd never see him again. Then, on the fifth day, the doorbell suddenly rang, and Ethel hurried to answer it as usual.
Hello, Duck.
The man introduced himself as Ernest and asked with a smile why she'd been waving at him. And though Ethel wanted to explain it was just coincidence, she hesitated. Ernest invited her to the movies that night, but since Ethel worked until 7, they agreed to meet at 8 outside the theater. It was the first time she'd ever received flowers, and she was over the moon. Soon they arrived at the meeting spot where Ernest, being a perfect gentleman, bought 2 tickets. And as the movie started, he slowly put his arm around Ethel's shoulder. Maybe that's how many love stories begin, with a movie. By the 6th day, Ethel took Ernest somewhere special, even straightening his tie for him. Turns out she was taking him to meet her parents, and Ernest wasn't the least bit awkward, making it a perfect day. But when Ethel suggested visiting Ernest's home, he refused, saying his place was too poor and the neighborhood was dirty and chaotic. Ethel wasn't upset at all and secretly made a bold decision. The next day, she quit her job. She was planning to marry Ernest. The wealthy lady of the house sneered at the idea of love, but seeing them so happy together, you could clearly read jealousy written all over her face. The couple then went to see a new house in a development they'd barely managed to buy with a 30-year mortgage. But it was definitely worth it. Spacious rooms with huge floor-to-ceiling windows. The bathroom had both a bathtub and a manual flush toilet. Ethel was already filled with dreams of the future, planning out a nursery. There was even a small garden out back that made them hug each other tight, dreaming of their beautiful life ahead. On the 8th day, they couldn't wait any longer and got married. In the days that followed, Ernest worked hard outside while Ethel kept house perfectly, living a peaceful life together. But one day, Ethel suddenly broke down crying, and Ernest rushed to comfort her. They'd been married over 2 years without conceiving a child, and at 37, Ethel feared she'd never get pregnant, which devastated her. So Ernest bought her the big mirror she'd always wanted to cheer her up with a surprise, but got a surprise of his own. Ethel was pregnant. The sudden good news made Ernest jump for joy as they held each other tight. Months later, the baby arrived safely, and as they discussed what to name their new little one, the doctor interrupted, asking to speak with Ernest privately.
Your wife is 38. There had better not be any more.
But we wanted a proper family.
More children, no more wife.
In that instant, Ernest understood. Having his wife by his side for life was blessing enough. 3 years passed, and that baby had grown into a little boy with adorable golden curls. A new coffee shop opened next door, and seeing its fancy interior, Ethel figured it must be expensive. But Ernest promised to take her there next time as the family happily headed home. One day, Ernest came home to find Ethel sobbing on the couch. Their son was starting school, and regulations required boys to have buzz cuts, which Ethel couldn't handle.
What's wrong with Mum?
In the following days, the family was incredibly happy, often taking their son to the beach for vacations, thinking this happiness would last forever. But one day, Ernest stood frozen by the radio with an unusually heavy expression, as the whole city's atmosphere seemed to tense up. Enemy forces were gathering at their country's borders. War might be coming. For safety, Ernest boarded up all their windows, planning to seal gaps with glue, and the family prepared gas masks, maybe the only thing that gave them any sense of security. Soon, air raid sirens wailed constantly as war officially began. The government announced the evacuation of 1 million children from the city, and though Ethel was heartbroken, for safety's sake they finally put their son on the train. In the days that followed, Ernest was assigned to the fire brigade, navigating the smoke-filled city daily in great danger. During that time, Ernest saw people dying from air raids every day, which weighed heavily on him, and Ethel's companionship was what kept him going, their only comfort coming from their son's letters from the countryside. The turmoil had left their home in shambles. Even the iron fence out front had to be removed to make planes and artillery. Ernest tried to cheer Ethel up by promising to build a wooden fence the next day. But war is cruel, and one dark night their house wasn't spared either. They decided to visit their long-absent son while the house was being repaired. The boy had completely adapted to country life, and when they reunited, the whole family's faces lit up with long-lost smiles, dreaming of having a little cottage in the country, though their city house still had over 20 years of mortgage payments left. Back in the city, Ernest built an iron cage that felt just right when he lay inside. It was Ernest's design for a new bed to sleep in at night. That evening, the air raid siren sounded again.
Hold tight, Duck.
But luckily, the iron cage was sturdy enough to keep them safe. Though looking at the broken teddy bear in their hands, they couldn't help worrying about their son far away in the countryside. Christmas finally came and people could reunite with their children, everyone singing and dancing with smiles on their faces. But one of Ernest's friends couldn't find any joy. One night, a bomb had silently taken his son's life. 3 years later, the war finally ended, and their family returned to peaceful life. But one day, a police car pulled up outside. Their son had been caught stealing, though fortunately, the police just gave him a verbal warning. Ethel couldn't believe her son would steal and gave him a good scolding. But when curious neighbors asked, Ethel said her son was helping police with an investigation, which is why the police car brought him home.
The chief inspector said he was a very clever boy.
Their son saw this from upstairs, and this invisible encouragement and protection made him feel so guilty he never did anything bad again. Years later, their son got into his dream university, making Ernest and Ethel very proud. But one day, Ernest came home to find Ethel crying on the stairs. Their son wanted to drop French to study art, which worried the couple so much they couldn't sleep all night.
There's no money in it. He'll never earn a living at it.
That lot's all long hair, drink and nude women.
Oh, Ernest.
But worried as they were, they ultimately chose to respect their son's choice. Soon after, their son grew his hair long and started dating fashionable female classmates. The couple grew old, always standing at the window, anxiously watching their son's retreating figure. That's life. Once toddlers grow up, the first thing they do is leave home for somewhere else. One day they received their son's draft notice and feared he'd die in battle like the neighbor's boy. Fortunately, he was assigned to an office as a draftsman, not a particularly dangerous position. Though reluctant to let him go, they were proud too. And in the days that followed, they often sat by their new telephone, waiting together for their son's calls. The years turned their hair gray, but Ernest still created surprises for Ethel, secretly buying a car and taking her for pleasant drives in the countryside. After discharge, their son found work as a school teacher, earning more in a day than Ernest made in a week, and Ethel was so proud of him. One day, their son brought home a girl, and when Ethel saw the girl's messy hair, she handed her a comb. This annoyed their son, who felt his mother was treating the girl like a child, though they apologized and made up at dinner. Soon after, their son married that girl, and Ethel urged them to have children quickly, but their son said they wouldn't have kids because his wife had schizophrenia. Though heartbroken, Ethel could only accept this reality. But misfortune wasn't done with this family. One day while watching TV, Ethel suddenly asked her husband who he was. Ernest was confused and immediately took her to the hospital for tests. Ethel had Alzheimer's. When talking with their son, Ethel couldn't remember when Christmas was. Seeing Ethel like this, Ernest left the room and quietly wiped away tears.
Who was that old man in here just now?
Oh, Mum. That was Dad.
Dad?
Yes.
To help bring back Ethel's memories, Ernest takes her to all the places they used to visit together. That coffee shop has already closed down. Sadly, even to this day, they've never had the chance to go inside and sit down together. Ernest wanted to take his wife out more often, but that night the hospital suddenly called, and after hanging up, Ernest seemed to have used up all his strength. His lifelong companion was gone. Father and son held each other in grief. In the days after, Ernest was alone in the big house, though he always set 2 places at meals. Perhaps, in his heart, Ethel had never truly left. One day, while reading the newspaper, Ernest suddenly felt sharp pain in his body with only a black cat watching him. Soon after, Ernest followed Ethel, and so they completed their ordinary yet happy life together. Actually, Ethel was 5 years older than Ernest, but Ernest always pampered her like a child, often preparing surprises for her. When Ethel was sad, Ernest would gently hug her, and Ethel kept house beautifully, never complaining about Ernest's meager income. They were each other's companions for life, overcoming many hardships and difficulties through mutual support, which is exactly the best state of marriage. Whether in poverty or wealth, in sickness or in health, he would love you and never leave your side.